I think our guest's ready for you.
Apparently,
yeah.
All right. And just getting straight into that, President Ramaphosa's weekly letter on Monday focused on South Africa's foreign policy with a special emphasis on Africa and BRICS relations. Now, Ramaphosa says that South Africa is in pursuit of African development, multilateral engagement, promotion of democracy, peace, and, of course, human rights. And focusing his attention on the benefits of SA-BRICS relations, the president says that South Africa's membership has been enhanced or rather has enhanced our country's position as an important emerging economy, giving South Africa access to the expertise of larger and established economies. Siphamandla Zondi is a professor of politics and international relations at the University of Johannesburg, and he joins us now to process some of the more salient points here. Dr. Zondi, thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, and good morning to the viewers.
So perhaps just in a nutshell, if we can just start by establishing South Africa's foreign policy position, especially pertaining to the rest of the continent and then to its BRICS counterparts. How would you sum that up in a nutshell?
It hasn't changed really. South Africa's foreign policy since 1994 has remained the same. Different administration and different presidents have sought to put more emphasis on one or the other thing over a period of time, but it remains the same. South Africa's ambition to drive African integration and drive collective action in the world has remained the same. South Africa's seek to balance security and development imperatives on the African continent has remained the same. South's commitment to South-South cooperation and South agency through IPSA, through NAM, or through BRICS has remained the same. So what it is really continuity with very little change, but it's really been continuity right through. So what President Ramaphosa had to do when he got into power was really to keep things moving the way they have been moving in a period of time. It's usually a positive that foreign policy has become so normalized that the operational arms of government are able to pursue it without much change, without relying on the political side of government. And that's a positive. But it can be a constraining factor where you need to be nimble, you need to be more dynamic, you need to respond, you need to change your behavior from time to time to reinforce your objectives. So there's no harm in just keeping things the same and maintaining it. But we have to admit a number of challenges that we've faced.
So, Professor, as you say,
over the past couple of years,
it's been pretty consistent. The president, in his latest weekly letter, speaks, though, of foreign policy that continues to be characterized by what he calls recasting the net. This since South Africa's first democratic election. What do we understand by that? What is meant by that characterization?
It simply means the process of normalizing South Africa's role as a foreign policy actor that is progressive, that plays a good role with everybody else, plays in the collective, that is fully integrated to the African continent. It's a long-term process. It's a work in progress that continues to happen and all the time. But what we must admit is that we have had a number of failures that may undermine that. Part of the failure is evidenced by, for example, the return of Morocco into the African Union without resolving the reasons why Morocco had left in the first place. The second one is the growing role of Israel on the African continent without the continent resolving the issues it had with Israel for a long period of time over the Palestinian territory. And a number of things. South Africa's failure to get its citizens elected in the African Union Commission is also signaling that there's such an element of diminishing influence that South Africa has. So President Ramaphosa has a huge headache over what to do in order to recover South Africa's role on the African continent, which by many accounts has been diminishing over a period of time for a number of reasons.
So the president says, and as you also reiterated, the country's foreign policy priorities are, of course, regional, political, economic integration, and also the pursuit of African development, along with the multilateral engagement and promotion of democracy, peace, and human rights. And now, some would say, because we have so much going on the domestic front, that sometimes some of these things that happen are lost on us. So recent examples of South Africa's interventions, if we can just speak to those. So we remember the ANC going to Zimbabwe to try and negotiate with ZANU-PF last year. We remember the Mozambique insurgent situation. Those are more recent. But let's talk about some examples of where South Africa as a country, as a sovereign state, has been involved in African human rights interventions on the continent.
It's a huge issue, and there are many examples that can be presented. And if you look at it carefully, in the Mandela era, you would be talking about how we took up the cause of the Ogoni people. In the Mbeki era, we could pick up how South Africa took up the cause of the Burundians, of the Zimbabweans and others, and perhaps under Ramaphosa it would be more a socio-economic rights around the fight against COVID-19 and getting the whole continent together to have a unified approach to this, which was going to be one of the biggest threats to human rights in the African continent, where you are referring to socio-economic right, the health right, the right to healthcare and access to vaccines. The big battles being fought over ensuring that there is fair distribution of the vaccines against the will of the big and powerful Western powers that are seeking to hog all of this and cover their nations first before other nations are covered. President Ramaphosa, by virtue of his position as the chairperson of the AU, really put up a strong fight for Africa's health rights. But what has been lacking for a long period of time is having a coherent approach to a number of things that must be done to continue to advance the African agenda. We've tended to pick single issues. Under Zuma, the single issue was finishing the Zimbabwe issue. And Mbeki, the single issue was this reform of the African Union. And then again now, under Ramaphosa, that single issue is the COVID-19 issue. So kind of score victories on the basis of a single issue and then a comprehensive foreign policy issue that look at strengthening regional integration in a real way, do something very specific about it, strengthening African integration in a very real way, African development, African security mechanisms, and so on. We still need a lot of work to work in a coherent way, especially we who have a large number of diplomatic missions on the African continent that could work very closely to produce for us something that is good for us and for Africa generally.
Some would argue that given the way South Africa has gone about implementing its foreign policy on the continent and extending that hand of Ubuntu has actually been to the detriment of South Africans themselves. And they would readily quote the Zimbabwe situation as an example, the number of Zimbabweans who now work and reside in South Africa because of what is going on in Zimbabwe. And they would say that that's a failure on the part of South Africa and how they've approached, for example, this regional question. So how would you respond to that, Professor?
I think the Zimbabwe question is the failure of the whole of Southern Africa, because clearly no single country was ever going to be able to manage that issue effectively. Of course, the continent, the region was seized with the Zimbabwe issue as early as 2002, but I think suffered the illusions that the Zimbabwean government would do the right thing and therefore make it easy for the region to intervene. But as we saw, the Zimbabwean government under Mugabe, and the current president was part of it, stalled things, sought to achieve a regime stability on its own. And by the time we got around to a global political agreement in 2008, a lot of damage had already been done. And then the government of national unity itself was not well handled by the Zimbabweans. But SADC could have done a lot more to signal to Zimbabwe that these things must be solved honestly and very quickly. Otherwise, the impact spills over to the rest of the region. So the region didn't work as well as it should. And South Africa, as a mandated mediator on behalf of the region, could have handled this a lot better. But the responsibility still remains a responsibility of the Zimbabwean government, which did not really handle its affairs as well as it should. A country should be able to manage its political crisis internally or seek help from outside, and Zimbabwe just did not have the audacity to really accept the help, even when help was being offered.
And of course, time against us, so can't really delve deeper into that, because I want to speak to the second part of that letter as well, Professor, that focused mainly on BRICS and the beneficial relationship that South Africa enjoys out of this as a strategic partner. So if we can just look at that in terms of the BRICS group of countries and advancing our own national development priorities through this particular alliance. Let's talk to that, Professor.
That is our ambition. Our ambition has always been, since we joined BRICS almost 10 years ago, it's an ambition that we're hoping that by strengthening BRICS cooperation, we would, for example, access technologies we have not been accessing. We would access new trade and investment opportunities, that we would learn from each other and learn from these countries. Some of them are doing very well, like China, across a range of indicators, especially on the economic side, that we would gain a lot from this. And that in the meantime, that was the thinking right at the beginning, while those economic benefits are going to come over a period of time, we will gain stature. What is very clear right now is that we really did gain stature. We're well regarded in the world because of our membership of BRICS. There were questions at the beginning whether we are the right size for the BRICS, but now we're in and we are riding on the shoulders of the big giants in world affairs. And that is good for us politically and economically, in the sense that it can boost our investor confidence towards us, and all of that. But the concrete outcomes are yet to come and have to come, and we need to make sure that they come. One of the most concrete outcomes we have seen is actually loans and funding from the new development bank. We still really need to work very hard to see specific exchange of the concrete exchange of technology and exchange of skills. And we still need to see clear transfer of value in meeting our national interest from the BRICS thing, which is why one of the biggest challenges facing BRICS now is to deepen intra-BRICS cooperation, so that there is a circulation of things happening within BRICS. I mean, COVID-19 showed us that it isn't all very well yet. Two of BRICS members had vaccines very early. Yet South Africa and India, for example, were acquiring vaccines from outside BRICS, from the Western countries. We still do. We still don't acquire the vaccines from China and from Russia that had these things very early on and stuff like that. So we still need to strengthen intra-BRICS things so that we move from a narrative to an experience of cooperation. That's what we really need to work on right now.
Well, absolutely. Dr. Spamandla Zondi, thanks so much for your time this morning. We have to leave it there, unfortunately. Dr. Zondi, Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Johannesburg, just helping us unpack some of President Ramaphosa's letter this week, which focused on South Africa's foreign policy with special focus on Africa and BRICS relations. And this is where we have to say goodbye to our SABC 2 viewers.